watching The Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of today's music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to The Producer's Room.
Welcome to this episode of The Producer's Room. I'm your host, Dave Tuff. We're coming to you from the House of David Studios here on Music Row. And I just wanted to mention David Briggs, the owner. Once again, you can find House of David online. David Briggs is one of the most recorded piano players in history. And if you look back, I encourage all our viewers to look back at his history online. He was with Elvis for a long time, played on some amazing recordings. One that comes to mind, I was trying to think of, was the Dobie Gray hit, what is it? Give Me the Beat Boys and Free My Soul. Drift Away, yeah. That's how I know David, but I actually just went down to the Country Music Hall of Fame, and there's a great exhibit if you're either in Nashville or coming to visit there called the Nashville Cats. It's Dylan and Cash and the Nashville Cats, and they're featuring all different session musicians from that era, and there's a nice little display on David, so I encourage you guys to go check that out. And once again, we want to thank David for having us here at the House of David Studios. So, without further ado, I want to welcome our guest, Mr. Dan Huff. Thanks so much for being with us today. Yeah. If you guys don't know the name Dan Huff, you should. Session musician, artist, and producer, and here's my little pun, music giant. Anyway, Dan has won Musician of the Year award in 2001 and 2004 from the Country Music Association, and Producer of the Year in 2006 and 2009 from the Academy of Country Music. I hope that's all true. Does that sound right?
Sounds good. Sounds good to me, even if it's not. No, I think it is.
So we're going to talk so much about the creative process. Dan is both, like I said, a guitar player, but also a producer, and really not just guitar, multi-instrumentalist, right? I was reading some of your credits, and it was like mandolin and dobro and guitar. And
yeah, but I mean, they're all tuned like a guitar. So really, it's like it's one size fits all.
And Ganjo? No.
Yeah.
So, first of all, let's start out a little bit about where you came from and where you're from originally. So where are you from originally, and then did you grow up in a musical family?
Yeah, I'm from here.
Okay.
We moved
Tennessee.
here. Yeah, we moved here when I was roughly about 10 years old.
Okay.
My dad had 3 sons, and he moved here. I didn't find this out till many years later, decades and decades later. But he moved here. He was working in church music. Mm-hmm. He was a conductor or a minister of music,
right.
choir leader, right?
Yeah.
And he really felt that he wanted to write for orchestra.
Oh, okay.
And he moved here to Nashville with 3 sons, wife, and like $600.
Wow.
I know, that's crazy, right?
And where did he move from? What?
At the time, I think we were living up in Illinois near
okay.
Chicago.
Okay.
He was working for his in-laws in the advertising mm-hmm. agency at that point, and that wasn't going to work with his in-laws. Mm-hmm. And so he came here and he started working with a guy named Bill Gaither, mm-hmm. who and their stuff, that kind of history was started mm-hmm. when they started doing what they did, so I got to view music front row seat in Nashville. They were doing the contemporary Christian industry was really pretty much that was the initial phase of mm-hmm. it. It was, and they were pretty much defining it. So when I was a kid, I used to come to all these studios here on Music Row and watch when they hired rhythm sections. Mm-hmm. So I got to when I was a teenager, I would come in and watch Reggie Young, Jimmy Colvard, and I don't know if that name. You remember Jimmy Colvard? I mean, and everybody who played, and my dad had really good relationships with all of them. He said, can my kid come in and sit and hang out? And I would just sit there and watch, and it was pretty much, that was my education,
Yeah. And so he was an orchestrator, or still is an orchestrator?
He retired now.
Okay.
Other than he was doing an orchestration yesterday, but he's retired. That's what he says. Yes.
Great. Yeah. Wow. So already a musical father, and then are your brothers and sisters?
2 brothers.
Okay.
My brother David is a tremendous musician. He's a drummer. That's mm-hmm. what he started with. We were in a band together. Mm-hmm. actually 2 bands together, and now he produces records.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and he lives between here and Los Angeles, and he's
Okay.
tremendous. My other brother, who is extremely musical, is a medical ethicist. So anyway, and very musical family. My mother's a pianist, wonderful classical pianist.
Wow.
So it was always on,
Yeah.
And the house was, the greatest story was when my dad was writing his orchestrations. He would have, this was back, when the little mini TVs first came out, he would have a miniature television stuck on his desk and blaring while he was writing orchestrations.
Huh.
And somebody
Yeah,
came in
you
and said,
would
well,
think.
why are you doing
Yeah.
that? Because how can you concentrate? Because he had to blot out me playing guitar in one part of the house and my brother playing drums. So the only thing he could do is turn up a television to take away from the melodies and rhythms that we were doing, so he could think about his
It was
manuscript.
like the early white noise machine or something.
Yeah, it was crazy, but
Wow.
he always made it easy for us to do whatever. He never told us to be quiet.
So you grew up playing guitar, obviously, and what age did you start playing guitar? Or is that your first instrument,
Yeah,
guitar? Or?
10, 11.
Okay,
And
okay.
then, when I was 13, my dad had a guitar player that he used on sessions. He'd come over and teach me a scale. And that was the beginning of it. And it's like that from that time, 13 years old, I wanted to be a studio guitar player.
Wow.
Didn't want to be in a rock band, didn't want to do anything else, just be in the studios.
And there were, at that time, studio guitar players, Jimmy Page over in England, and here, obviously, the guys that you were mentioning, the players here, Chet Atkins and all those guys.
Chet at that point was producing, so he'd moved
Okay.
beyond. It was
What generation of musicians?
it was the Reggie Young,
Okay.
Pete Sanford,
Okay.
Jerry Kennedy. I grew up with Jerry Kennedy's sons too, so
Yeah.
they, a lot of proximity to great guitar.
Gotcha.
I grew up with Grady Martin's son.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, I had it all around me, and
Yeah.
then plus the new guitar players that were really rocking it at that time, I got to go see because of my
Wow.
dad. So, and I just thought it was the coolest thing that guys could come into a studio. They would bring their amps and their guitars, and they could come up with stuff
Yeah.
out of they
Yes.
weren't.
Yes.
And that was appealing to
Right.
me, as
Right.
opposed to that even a rock star.
Just playing live. And
Yeah.
in front, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is a different personality either way, if you get your energy from an audience or if you get it from creating new things.
Yeah.
And I feel you on that. And so you're playing guitar. When was your first, I guess, professional session that you got paid for? Was that early on?
I
in
remember.
Nashville?
It was at Lee Hazen's studio by the pond out in by the lake in was it Goodlettsville or what and I was 16.
Wow. Wow.
And I was on cloud 9. And I started doing, as a result. Then I had a really lucky situation that involves Belmont. It was Belmont College back then.
Yes.
I had a deal with my dad that if I kept my grades up in high school, that he'd let me go. And there was a little studio, it was a basement studio.
Yeah, that was the first one. Yeah,
Right.
The Malloy, yeah.
And they would, and my friends were people like Mark Wright, who went on to produce
Yeah.
millions of records,
Yeah.
and became a record executive. Basically, I'd go there. They'd book the studio at midnight, and I was free.
Wow.
So what better,
Great
it was,
experience,
It
yeah.
was so, and as long as I kept my grades up, that
Yeah.
was all I wanted to do. And I learned from all those guys, and even before I had my license, there's Mark Wright. He still tells a story, because he would come and get me from baseball practice and cart me over there, and I was in love with the process.
Right, right. So at that point, you weren't even thinking about the production. That came a lot later. You were really focused on being the best session guitar player you could be.
Oh,
like,
that's
when you
all
grew
I
up. Yeah.
all I just wanted to be was
Yeah.
a studio. I mean, that was it.
Yeah.
That was the end of the road for me.
And so maybe I'm jumping forward too much. Well, one other quick question about your early days. I see this console back here. I was told by the power, someone up above, that you actually recorded at this studio. Is that right?
Yeah.
House of David?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I know I've been here in several capacities, but my first real memory was I think I was 20 or maybe 21, but it was right before I moved to the West Coast, and they were doing a Joe Cocker record.
Oh, wow. Joe Cocker in Nashville. I didn't
Joe
know he cut
Cocker in
here.
Nashville,
Yeah.
and I was in Tallweeds. I remember Reggie Young was playing.
Wow.
Reggie's he's a legend.
Idols, yeah.
And and they David Briggs, all those guys treated me so kindly. I was so green, but I guess they saw something that I kind of gravitated towards. That they liked that little bit of a wild card young kid,
Yeah.
And it was great, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you're playing on sessions here. Why do you decide to make the move to LA? Was the scene here not exactly what you wanted, or was it something else drawing you out there to Los Angeles?
Yes, at that time, this was in the early '80s.
Okay.
And at that time, Nashville still was you know, and I say this with respect, but it was still kind of a good old boys town overall. Not, you know, discounting those folks, and there are other people in my life and career that were not this way, but it was not a town that was extremely gravitated towards youth in music, and the way I played guitar and what interested me was not really kind of what was going on in Nashville at the time.
Sure.
And so Los Angeles at that time, that was Mecca, and my favorite guitar players, it was it. And I had done a pop record. David Hungate of Toto had just moved to Nashville, and I got to work with him on something. He said, "You definitely need to go to Los Angeles."
Wow. That's great advice.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and then what happened is that there was a producer named Ronnie Hafkin was doing a Lou Rawls record at that time, and he had cut the tracks, or some of the tracks, in Los Angeles. There was an arranger, keyboard player who was blowing up out there named Robbie Buchanan. Who heard, you know, and it's just the irony of, and just kind of fate.
Sure.
He heard a guitar part that I played, and he wanted to know who the guitar player was. Got my name and number, said, "Hey, you should move out to Los Angeles. There's a real void." Steve Lukather, who was a few years older than me, had just abdicated that spot, and it really
from joining Toto.
Yes,
because he had given up his session work.
That's exactly what it was. And so my wife and I, we were two young kids. We got in our
Why
car,
not, you know?
and we had nothing to lose. And
Cool.
and so for a while, I kind of I had people book me on sessions, like I lived out there. I would catch a flight, take my gear. It was back when you could pay to get your gear on a flight, and I basically carted all myself, and I would every time I'd lose about $500 to $1,000. So it was not a real money making thing, but
getting your foot in the door.
Getting my foot in the door, and you know, then I'd take red-eye flights to get back here to do demos in Nashville.
Wow.
So it was an exciting time for me, but it was pretty obvious that if I was going to try it, I was going to move out there.
Yeah.
And so that was it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We're going to take a quick break and be back, and I want to talk more about the LA session scene in the early 80s with Dan Huff. See you in a minute.
Music is the most valuable thing that there is. People expect music to be free. It's like the air.
Every single thing you hear comes from the mind and the heart of a songwriter.
The only way we are able to make a living is by convincing people that this won't exist without us, and it is necessary.
ASCAP makes sure that we have a voice.
Welcome back to the Producer's Room. Once again, I'm really excited today. I mean, I'm more than excited, ecstatic to have Dan Huff here with us. And we were just speaking when we broke about the LA studio scene in the early 80s. So you're out there and you find yourself playing. I mean, what were the rhythm sections back there? Was Jeff Porcaro playing or any of those? Yeah?
It was a dream. And I have to mention, I was extremely lucky. It was one of those kind of fairy tale things. I moved out there. And you know who got our first little teeny three-room condo? Do you know the name Jack Joseph Puig?
Oh yeah,
Jack.
JJP. Yeah.
Jack was, you know, he and his wife then found us a little place up in La Crescenta, or Montrose, California. And so anyway, and you know, it was one of those things where a lot of people after the fact said, "How'd you break in so fast?"
Yeah.
I had no clue. It was right time. Like one of the first sessions that I did was for a producer named Arif Martin.
That's not, that's not a bad name.
No, it's like, but it was because Robbie Buchanan. It was like the right time.
Yeah.
I was prepared. It was one of those things. I knew what to do, even though I didn't know that I knew what to do.
Right.
My reading was pretty marginal, but I all the years that I just sat down in my basement, dropping, you know, a phonograph needle and learning how to identify parts that worked on records. Well, the pop music during that time, it was all that, and they were hungry for new talent.
Yeah.
And if you did good on one session, word of mouth just went like this. So within about 6 months, I was booked every day.
Wow.
And it was bizarre because some of the stuff that I was cutting on, I just, you know, I spent a lot of my youth doing. I was really attracted to R&B music, so I got to play on all these Motown records out there. And it was really, it's like, and they had the Motown studios out there.
That's when they had relocated to LA in the late 70s.
And it was, wow. so from Chaka Khan to the Temptations, the Four Tops, later on Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I have your list here. In fact, this may be a good segue to talk about moving in the creative process. But tell me if all these are correct. I got these off the internet, so you never can trust that.
Yeah,
but they may not be in chronological order either. But Danger Zone, Kenny Loggins, Man in the Mirror, and I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Michael Jackson. My Heart Will Go On, Celine Dion. Here I go again, the radio version, Whitesnake. Rhythm of the Night, The Barge, which was songwriter. I'm blanking. Diane Warren.
Yeah, that was her first hit.
Gloria Love, Peter Cetera, and then of course Next Time I Fall, the duet with Amy Grant. All I Want for Christmas Is You, which is still just overplayed during Christmas time, but Mariah's Straight Up, and Cold Hearted, Paula Abdul. And this is what got me, because we had our last episode was with Tim Nichols, who's now writing with Burt Bacharach, and On My Own. Michael McDonald and Patti LaBelle, which is the Bacharach connection there. And so anyway, all of those hits, obviously you're getting calls, and so like I was telling you earlier, this show's about the creative process. And as a studio guitar player, it always amazes me working in the studio with good studio guitar players. You can almost visualize the arrangement before it's laid down. For instance, you would say, I'll lay down one part and then another part on top of it. How do you have to think to not have all those parts, stepping on top of each other? Is it a certain way you think, or is it just from listening to records, you just know intuitively what to play? Or did you actually think of, I'm going to play a part in the lower register and then something in the middle register and then something in the higher register, or I'm going to play something short, like, staccato or palm muted, and then I'll play something longer? I mean, is there any particular way you think as a studio guitar player in your arrangement sense?
Well, I think it encompasses all of what you said. I think most of it's intuitive in the sense that I don't think that I would sit down and hear something and map that out that way. Yeah. But you always have to keep what's most important, which would be the vocal and the melody.
Yeah.
And so I figured out I'd get hired if I made the producer look good and the singer look good.
That's good advice.
Yeah, so if it makes them sound good, if you find hooks that move the song along, rhythm that perpetuates what they're trying to go for, it was a kind of a 1-2 punch if they're going to ask you to come back.
Right.
So, and all that stuff plays in. But I think the education was listening to music when I was growing up, and I was always very attracted to moments.
Yes.
And it encompasses dynamics, it's rhythm, it's sound, it's all the above. It's like, what comes first? I think it has to be intuitive.
Yeah. And you were breaking new ground. When you said sound, I was thinking tones too. I mean, this was the first time, as I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for our audience, effects like chorus, digital delay, all of that's coming into the guitar sound.
We overused all that.
Well, but you guys were breaking new ground, so it's like, was it your contemporaries also that you guys were kind of keeping up with each other as far as sounds, or competing, or all of the above?
All the above. The guitar playing pool out there, you mentioned, when we were talking a little bit ago, Mike Landau.
Right.
Paul Jackson Jr., all these guitar, Dean Parks.
Yeah, Dean,
And I mean, the level was so high, and it was that kind of competition pulls you up. Either kills you or pulls you up.
Right.
And I think we all had a extremely healthy competition, but respect for one another. And like all these guys, and there are plenty more too, but I always noticed that everybody, they knew how to play ensemble. So I worked a lot with Mike Landau.
Yeah.
And it was never one of those things where you ever felt like there was a kind of a battle for turf. And I love that. And usually the best are that way.
Sure.
But I learned a lot. I learned a tremendous amount from other instrumentalists too.
Sure.
probably who I learned the most. I feel like I learned the most from as a musician was a drummer, Jeff Becerril.
Yeah.
And I got to sit in rooms. And remember, this is when I was in my 20s. So this was the holy grail. And so one day it would be Jeff Becerril and David Paich would be playing, or Steve Lukather too. And then John Robinson would be on the next, or Carlos Vega. And if you're a credit hound like I am, these were all the people that I just absolutely. When I heard records, they were just right before me. They were all 4, 5, 6 years older than me. So they were in the deep end. And so you'd find yourself in the studio with them, and like Marcus Miller would be on sessions all of a sudden, or Will Lee, and the list goes on. David Foster, Michael O'Marney, and so the depth and their level of professionalism. Their first instincts were so good, and what they do is they'd raise a room.
Right.
So it just,
you're all feeding on each other.
That's it.
So well, that leads me to another question. In your current productions, are you still getting a band together in one room? Do you think those musicians feeding off each other still makes a difference, or is it more overdubs nowadays as far as the energy that's shared?
I think the irony is that I didn't listen to country music until I was 30 years old, right? So, so I never had that in my mind. But Nashville has become Los Angeles, really, in a certain way. And I think part of our strength is still collaboration, songwriting. Yeah. And there's that kind of X factor when musicians get together. And if you cast the right band, there's stuff that you never dream of that can happen in the moment. Certainly there's a lot of overdub, a lot of post-production, all that kind of stuff because of budgets and whatnot. But no, I still think we have, and that's what, and my friends from Los Angeles who sometimes come and play on some of the records that we do here in Nashville, they always comment about the fact that that's something they miss from those days, or if they're younger. That they never really had, Wow. It's like the days of yore, It's like the golden age.
I know, man. It really was in LA at that time. And so let's go ahead and move forward just a little bit chronologically. You are doing all this session work. How did you move to being an artist and being in all these bands? And then I didn't even know that you were also the lead singer of Giant. It took me a while to see that you're the guy singing in the video. So not only playing the great solos, but singing, huh?
Well, that came just, I think, my friend Alan Pasqua, who's a great keyboard player I played a lot of sessions with, we just got, we were playing so many sessions, and we just kind of got bored. And so there was a band that was rehearsing. This was, and I don't know if you know the names, Tom Kelly, songwriter.
I don't, but
Tommy Funderburg. They were also the top background singers in the rock industry back then. But they were writing songs for Madonna at this time and stuff, and people of that caliber. And they wanted to do a band, so basically Mike Baird, I believe, was the original. Denny Belfield was the bass player, and Alan Pasqua and myself, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we would go hang out. REO had a rehearsal place down somewhere in the valley, their place, and we would just kind of moonlight and go work up songs.
Wow.
But we had a difference of opinion when some of the songs they brought in. We were like, oh, I don't know about this.
So you were using external writers, or you guys were writing?
No, the Tom Kelly and Tommy Funderburg. And again, they were great. They were writing hits, but it was a different type of thing, and we wanted to kind of rock a little bit more.
Sure.
And so that was the beginning of our band Giant. And then we asked my brother David, who came out from Nashville, and Mike Brignardello, who was a great Nashville bass player.
Still playing, right?
and they came out, and so we ditched the singers, and it was like, well, who's going to sing? And so I had sung in the
straws, right?
Yeah, just nobody wanted to, but I had sung a little bit in the Christian band that I had worked on pre-moving to Los Angeles. So I figured, why not give it a rip? And wouldn't you know, we got signed. Got signed just like that. We wrote some songs. And we were out playing. I don't think we played good live, but back then it was more about the hair and
it was the image and
I was not so great at that. And again, we were good. I mean, I liked the records we made, and we had some nice comments from, I should say, some peers. But it was out of boredom, and it was just, and then all of a sudden it came so fast and easy. And we thought, well, we're going to be rock stars now. And then, once you know, 1991 happened. And I'll never forget, I was in a studio in New York City putting the final touches on something. And I saw a Pearl Jam video, Even Flow.
Yeah.
And I just remember saying, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm not Eddie Vedder. I can't be him.
Yeah.
Never be that cool. and then
don't wear flannel.
the grunge explosion happened, and at this time Sherry and my wife and I had moved back to Nashville, thinking I was never going to play sessions again.
Yeah.
We had our first kid, and it was like, okay, well, that's over, and our band just tanked after that, because we weren't going to do a grunge band because that wasn't our thing. And so that was the point. Am I leading you this, or should I just go?
No, that's great. No, because I think it's even good for our viewers that even someone like Dan Huff has highs and lows, and
it was
that there wasn't any work, And,
well, it's either going to move back out to LA to and I had a bunch of people say, "Are you going to really leave all your studio career?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm leaving it all."
Yeah.
But so we had a choice to either move back to Los Angeles and kind of resume. And we didn't want to. We wanted to. All our families were here in Tennessee, and so it just so happened that there was this producer who caught fire in the early '90s named James Stroud in Nashville, and he was producing so many records, and he wanted something different on his records. He knew me from back before the Los Angeles days. As a matter of fact, he had done some records out in Los Angeles and hired me and sought me out there. And he was doing country music, and I said, "Well, James, I'm horrible country player."
Right.
There were several times that Jimmy Bowen had flown me into Nashville because he would do the same thing. He would bring in Los Angeles players, but he would just kind of have us do our little things what we did. He wouldn't rely on us for the country.
Right. He had that pop sensibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I was very aware of what was going down in country music, and I was not good at that. I mean, I had so much to learn. I mean, and I remember some of my first sessions I played with Steve Gibson. And he just smoked me. He was so good.
Right.
And I spent all my time going, "What are you doing?" And actually, Tony Brown was producing on this session.
Right.
I'm sounding like I'm just dropping names. I'll just keep picking them up, but that was the truth.
Yeah, we're just
and these guys, and this is what James really hit on. He said, "Look, we can get that. There are people that do that and that are the top. What we want you to do is be yourself, and we're going to integrate that." The country was expanding then.
Yeah.
I found a new home.
Good.
And I also rediscovered,
or refound your home, I should say.
I refound my home, and
Right.
it was like all of a sudden I could do something and I could add to the game
Right.
here. And it was great because this was my home.
Yeah.
And they just let me do what I did, and country kind of started rocking a bit more, I guess it was what happened. And then I started getting calls from this South African producer named Mutt Lang.
Yeah, we know him, I think.
Yeah, that's a big one. I can't even pick up that name. But that was the transition for me because I started doing records for Mutt. I would do them here or go over to his place in England.
And this was his rock stuff, or this was when the first Shania stuff, or this was
prior to the Shania? But he was doing a record on an obscure artist that he had promised to do. That was the first time, but he wanted to try. He loved Nashville, and he wanted to make a record in Nashville. It was great, and we did that. The record it never saw the light of day, and it was more of an obligation, I think, for him. But out of that, he started calling me to do other records. He was doing Michael Bolton at that time, which was interesting.
Yeah.
He did. I don't know if you remember a song called "Said I Loved You, But I Lied."
Yeah.
That was like one of the things we were doing over at his place.
Okay.
But the irony was like I think that was the record. Yeah, he called me over there and he said, I'll work on 2 or 3 songs, and I was used to doing stuff pretty quickly.
Right.
And we were 2 days in and we were still on the first guitar part.
Working on some tones, huh?
Well,
I know he's a perfectionist, but his records are amazing. So
well, and I was panicked because when he left the studio, I asked the engineer. I said, I feel like I'm blowing this gig, and this is my hero, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "You're going at the speed of light," and I couldn't understand that. And he said, "Look, we had just done Bryan Adams' record. We overdubbed guitars, the overdubs, for 6 months straight." Woo. He said, "You're flying." So anyway, so I took a breath, and I kind of relaxed. And I realized he and I heard music very similar.
Sure,
he liked the way I played rhythm guitar. And the solos, he said, "Yeah, you can play any solo you want." He was leaving the studio a lot, I noticed. And he had no chemical problems or anything like that. He's a
Yeah.
vegan, and
Wow.
he doesn't drink, doesn't do anything.
Sure.
He had met this girl in Nashville named Shania Twain, so he was talking to her transatlantic, and he told me, I said, yeah, I want to come back to Nashville and do a country record. I said, well, that's cool, thinking, and he said, by the way, you won't be playing on it.
Oh.
And I said, why? He said, well, you're not country at all. This is the greatest rock producer telling me that I'm not country, which was very astute, and I wasn't. But and he said, no, it's a woman named Shania Twain. I think she's going to be really good. So I said, well, great, okay, whatever. So anyway, he came to Nashville. This is probably about 6 months later, and I got a call from him one afternoon. He said, Dan, would you fancy come down and have a play? And I said, well, what? I said, I thought you weren't going to use me on this. He said, I changed my mind. I need your wrist. That was his. He said, the way you said there's certain things. So that was the beginning. And I think the first song I played on was Any Man of Mine.
Wow.
And so that, and I'm leading you here in this thing. I will get out of this thing.
No, that's good.
But it was because
it's the transition that I want to see.
it was it. And he finally told me, he said, I think you're a producer.
And just from your playing, or just from the things that you were focusing in on in the studio?
The stuff you were asking me a minute ago.
The arrangement, the thinking of the whole picture.
Yeah, it was just, we just saw music the same way, and so the way we would layer, and he saw, I guess he saw in me that was the foundation for somebody who should produce records.
Right.
So it was really because of him and Shania at that time. I'd been playing on Faith Hill Records, and she and her producer had just split up, and it was because of them. They told Faith, they said, "Why don't you give Dan a shot?" Because she was going to use Byron Gallimore, which she did. She used both of us. But I had just finished producing. I was producing Megadeth at that time, so it was
which is a whole other question we need to get to. But we'll talk about that.
Bizarre, but that was the beginning, and it was because I had, the major endorsement that you could never pay for. Mutt Lange saying, "Give this kid a chance," and so that was probably.
That wasn't your first. That was one of your first records as a producer. Was the Faith, the one with Breathe and all that?
No, it was pre that one.
Pre that one. Okay.
No, and it was and like I said, I had played on records in Nashville at that point. Musician, either you were a producer or you were a musician.
Right.
And so the transition was a little tough.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you're jumping into the big boy pool, know. And just because you played on hit records doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to trust you to make hit records.
Sure.
So it was first couple years.
So when we come back, I want to finish up this conversation and talk about Dan's further transition into moving in production. Of course, you're still playing guitar, but all the artists that you've worked with. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching.
I have a gift of playing music. That's what I got. I was pretty much afraid of everything. Afraid of the world, afraid of speaking. Music was the voice I didn't have.
Welcome back to the Producer's Room. Once again, we're here with Dan Huff, and we were just getting into going to LA, coming back to Nashville, kind of like the prodigal son of learning the craft in LA, coming and bringing those chops back to Nashville, and then finally getting asked to produce some records with the encouragement of Mutt and working that way. Is that correct? Is that where we were?
It's totally where we were.
Okay, so next question, and I want to move into the creative process since this is what the show is about. So you said it was hard to be a musician and a producer, but you still have been able to keep that up throughout the years of doing both on the records. And my question is basically, how do you know if you're the right guy to play on the record?
I got a great answer for that. First of all,
budget or
well, I'm free. I'm free. No, it's when I produce a record, I don't have to play on it. That's never a prerequisite for it. It's not never been for me to play guitar.
Yeah.
But there's certain things I do that I legitimately do well. People like it, and but what it allows me, it allows me to also have kind of a knowingness like I can let other guitar players be who they are. They're just specifically with the great guitar players in Nashville. And I work with a handful of great ones who are just brilliant at what they do, and I never feel the need for them to tell them to do certain stuff that I know that in a pinch I can just do in my house. So it allows me to allow them to be who they are.
That makes sense.
Seek out personality, and you know that in your bag. I like the lightning.
Got thunder.
Yeah, I love that. It also. I mean, even from a budget standpoint too. I mean, it's easy to make records.
And you were talking, and I like the word that you mentioned. You said casting players, casting guitar players. So, in your head, you know the things that can contribute to a record, make or break it, and you know the guys to call, right? I mean, if it's a rock record, it's a country record, you probably are going to call a different rhythm section or some different guys as far as casting each artist.
Yes.
And that just comes with experience, right?
That's totally. I mean, and also having been miscast several times as a player.
Yeah.
Just it's a horrible position to be in. It's like you to be called to do something that's not your strength.
Yeah.
That you just want to say, why don't you call this guy? That's who I'm copying. You know, like Brent Mason.
Yeah.
You know, what a rare talent that man has. There were times when I would get called to do chicken picking stuff in Nashville. It's like, and yeah, my version of it is what my version.
Yeah.
But I mean, my God, come on. You know, it's like you got Brent Mason. Don't make me sweat and do what he does without even thinking.
Right.
So, but being a musician and having been in the trenches for decades, you tend to be able to identify strengths in players, what they do the best, what's their personality, and I think that also allows me to bring another thing. You know, you don't have to be a musician to be a record producer, but there's also something wonderful about it because it allows you to kind of have that knowingness about who brings what to the table, not miscasting, and being able to kind of get that synergy going.
Right.
You know?
Well, and that leads me to another question as a producer. How are you, since your talents lie more in the musical area, how do you cast the technical side of things? Do you hear other engineers, hear their mixes, hear their work, and know that you want to work with them from their other...
Totally.
Yeah, and build your team and...
Yeah, it's totally, you know, and like for me, there's a practical side too. You know, I joke about this, but there's a truth to it. I mean, I work with a lot of different kind of musicians, or artists, I should say. And if I use the same cast for everything, it's going to get very one-dimensional.
Right.
So you're constantly looking for different layers of creativity, sound. You know, the playing, songwriting, the whole thing. To you got to mix it up a little bit. So it doesn't sound like I'm a one-trick pony.
Right. That leads me to my next question, and you don't have to answer this, but is there a Dann Huff sound? Is there something that you bring, a commonality to all the records that you work on? Or a technique, perhaps, you know.
Well, I mean, I hope that there is not a Dann Huff sound.
Right.
And I'm thinking that so far I've escaped pretty much, because if you do have a sound and it's popular,
right,
you're gonna go fast and furious. But when that becomes not popular, you're not gonna be working.
Yeah, you can ask Phil Spector about that.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I try not to have the same methodology. I think it's probably the last one
because you have hit after hit after hit. It would be nice to just fall back on a formula, you know. But as you're saying, you can't do that because you gotta.
I hunt and peck. I mean, that's really I'm slow, which drives some of the artists that I work with crazy. It's like. It still comes down. I sit in my studio and I'll sit and muck around with guitar parts. I'll comp vocals, I'll comp tracks, and it's just like doing a crossword puzzle. You're waiting to hear moments, and all of a sudden you'll discover something that makes you feel something, and that's the start of it, you know.
Wow.
And then I'm patient, so maybe that's one of my good qualities.
Sure.
I think I think maybe thorough would be maybe something
I like that.
And I like to discover what the artist really wants. Some of it's just pop music. Some of it goes deeper, but it's not my agenda. I enjoy working with people, and it's not. I don't always have to just love the music. But there has to be something that you become passionate about within it. You know.
And so and I love that answer. When you're wanting to serve the artist, like you said, you're here to serve the artist. Is that pre-production? Is that when you meet with the artist for the first time, if you've never worked with them, and you say, what are your goals as an artist? What are your goals for this project? Maybe even picking some songs. Does that all tie into?
It ties whatever they need.
Yeah.
I prefer working. I mean, it's easier, I should say, when you work with songwriters. I love it when somebody comes in and says, "This is my music."
Right.
I'm not. Yeah, can I hear a hit song? Sure,
Right.
But it's always tempered by my subjective tastes.
And which goes back to, what is your ultimate goal as a producer, I guess? I mean, is it?
I like making music. I'm still
Yeah.
just a musician, is what
Sure,
it is.
sure.
So it's when somebody comes and says, "This is my song," I usually am not going to sit there and argue with them and go, "I don't like that," unless it's something that I think is totally cliche. And for the most part, my question is, do you believe in this?
Yeah.
Is this who you are?
Sure.
Let's start.
Yeah.
Let's get going. So there also is another type of producer that comes in and says, "Here are the songs. Here's what we're going to do."
Sure.
And I've never been that.
And you never feel that pressure from the labels to say, jump on the bro country bandwagon, or this bandwagon of what's hot now, or as long as it.
No, they've been pretty. Maybe because I'm old.
Yeah,
everybody leaves me alone.
No, they can trust you. I would assume from your track record they could probably trust you.
I think it's. To me, it's like what is cliche for one person is somebody else's life story.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm not all. It's not always three chords and the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just entertainment.
Sure.
And pop music is fun too.
Right.
Sometimes songs are just meant to sound good and make you feel good.
Sure.
They don't have to. Not everything has to be an epic. Some people want to say what they say quietly. Some people want a lot of noise. Some people are very regionally, molded in the way that their style is. You just want to discover that. And I guess it goes back to me being a studio player. I liked all styles.
Yeah.
So the more the merrier for me. I'm lucky. Like I get to work with somebody like Brantley Gilbert, who's so. That Georgia thing. And it's unapologetically, and it's like so, and we relate on certain levels or certain rock sensibilities that we have. Certain country things, really hardcore things, I don't know that much about. That he kind of leads me in.
Sure. That's interesting.
It's
because his stuff it's pretty heavy. It really is. I like it.
It's a bizarre combination, and then Keith and I have worked together for years and albums, and I learn something every time I'm in the studio with him. Just it's fun because it's discovery.
Right.
And I think maybe that's I thought I'd be kicked out of the game 5 years ago.
Right.
But I think I'm discovering through younger artists also. Everybody's got something to teach you.
But your productions do seem to keep up. I mean, they're always current, I think. And so, is that just from listening, or like you said, just learning from others, listening to what the programming, for instance, now coming into country music and all of that, just kind of listening to what's out there. Yeah, I know, man.
Well,
but
what?
It still sounds solid. It's not overdone, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Seems, yeah. So.
Well, I just did a record. I'm really thrilled, and I enjoy it. An artist named Thomas Rhett.
Yes, Thomas. Yes.
I did that I co-produced that with Jesse Frazier. And that's another way to kind of keep reinventing yourself is co-produce, because it's not all on me. And I even asked Thomas Rhett, he's 25. He's young. I said, Jesse's like a great programmer. What do you need me for? And he just said, your sensibility, just what you do. You don't have to be Jesse, which is good because I'm not a good programmer.
Right.
Jesse's great,
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we find this kind of new musical language between us. I mean, it's not saying that we found everything new, but it was really exciting because I didn't have to pretend who I was. I just kind of do what I do, and he would do the same thing. And I think we found something that this record's really resonating.
Cool.
So
and that just came out, right? I mean,
his album just came out.
This year,
yeah. Oh, well, just I think 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I loved his last record. So that's
this
cool.
is totally departure for him,
okay.
and this thing goes deep, many layers.
Wow.
It's pretty exciting, and then like just recently. I'd done like 6 records with Keith Urban, and I think we forged kind of a sound together. And
well, even the first record I was going to bring up had that was the first time I really heard that 4-on-the-floor driving bass drum when you guys worked together. Or Golden Road, was that the one with the...
Yeah.
And when I heard that on radio, I was like, man, this is a whole new sound. I mean, I was out in LA then, and so were you guys going for that on that record, or...
Well, he wrote it with a Los Angeles writer named John Shanks.
Well, that might be one reason. But, but still, it had that. It was fresh.
Yeah. It just happened. It's like I don't. I'm. It's like when you get in a room as a musician, things happen. If you're not afraid, and you just keep with a thought, and that was the first song that I got to work with Keith on. Isn't that bizarre? Talk about luck.
Yeah.
But it, and that's a whole other story itself. But it's like, so we did like 6 records together, and then actually at that point I'd done 6 Rascal Flatts records and 6 Keith Urban records.
Wow.
So you want to know about the ups and the downs. So those were big ups. I mean, that for about a decade was defining, sound,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the same year, both of those artists basically fired me.
Oh, man.
We're all friends.
Yeah,
so
but
it
they
wasn't
want
like,
to try something new and
well, they had to.
new direction.
I wasn't going to fire them.
Yeah.
So in collaborations do hit kind of a peak, and there was some. We were repeating. It just the way it goes. That was a tough year because all of a sudden you start doubting yourself. Well, so I got and other things came and that was fine. But it's come around kind of full circle with Keith. We just did a song just recently that just peaked. I hate to define it, but it's in its importance by being number one. This one happened to be number one, but it's a song we just hit number one I think last week.
And what's the name of it so we can go listen to it?
It's called John. Dear John, John Cougar, John Dear John 316.
I think Joe Baldridge posted a video on that one.
Joe Baldridge,
I think I saw some of the behind the scenes. So everybody can check that out on YouTube. Yeah, so
it was in Joe engineering.
Yeah,
and it was really cool because that was a case right there. I think that was a case where Keith had more of the initial ideas than I did. It's like. And I guess, and you didn't ask this question, but this is another part of even record making, producing, just everything in music. You have to also allow it not always to be about you.
Right.
And sometimes you got to follow these things through. But there's still something. It's the collaboration.
Yeah.
Those things don't happen unless you're
on
together.
that video. It's really fresh because you guys are like, you and Keith are working back and forth. I think Chris is out there out there on the floor or something, but you guys are trading. He's playing bass and you're playing something else, and then you guys are switching back and forth. And
it's just how we do it.
That whole,
and that's a lot of. I mean, we got a lot of history. We're
right.
like brothers. I mean, we've done so many records together, and there's a kind of a knowingness and a trust factor.
Yeah.
So it comes in all shapes and sizes, and I guess that's that. You asked that question about is there a sound. I think the only way you survive in this business is to continually grow, and you have to grow in every direction. And it means that you also know that you don't own it. You don't have the corner on it.
Right.
And even if you do have a track record that you're lucky enough to, if the second you put your foot in the ground and you become immobile, it's probably the end of what you got going.
Right. Right. That's great. All right, we're going to move to one more segment, and we're going to talk to Dan about some rapid-fire questions and also talk to his son, Elliot. So we'll have a little father-son discussion. It'll be fun. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.